What's up, everybody? Welcome into a brand new happy hour here on the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for being here. Hope your Friday's treating you well. Hope you're all set for a epic weekend, even though we don't have any NFL to celebrate, but it is what it is. We'll get through it, I'm sure, somehow. As I mentioned, thanks so much for being here, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. I do have a hard out around 3:45 today, so if I forget, please remind me, but I'll get to as many questions as I can before that. I do have it set up today that questions are available for subscribers only, so if you want to get your questions in, not members, you don't have to pay anything, just hit that little subscribe button, and you'll be able to ask questions, and we always appreciate those subscriptions a ton. Members chats will go to the top of the list, and any super chats will go to the very top of the list. So get those in when you have a chance. Let's start though with Chicken, who got here at 9:30 a.m. To make sure that he got his question in. The loss of Camp to the Jags cannot be overlooked. I do think it is a big loss for the defense in a variety of different ways. First of all, I don't know if you saw the report today. I think it was per Silverstein. I forget who it was, but the report today that Anthony Campanile turned down the Penn State defensive coordinator position and was going to be the 49ers defensive coordinator had Robert Saleh gotten a head coaching job somewhere. Then Campanile was going to get the defensive coordinator job there. And then, of course, he did get the Jaguars one. So he was a very, very sought after defensive coordinator candidate this year. And deservedly so. You know, he was a sought after defensive coordinator candidate last year when Green Bay hired Jeff Hafley. And it was just, I'm not lucky, but it was good fortune that Green Bay was able to get him in as a linebackers coach / run game coordinator in Green Bay. You kind of always wondered, was it going to be something that was going to be able to last, or would he ultimately end up going somewhere pretty quick? Well, we got our answer pretty quick. He is, again, now the defensive coordinator in Jacksonville. I thought he did a really nice job. I know I talked to Ross Uglum today on the Pack-A-Day radio show, and he kind of talked about, you know, the linebackers not getting to depth at times. And, you know, that it wasn't like an astounding season from the linebackers. I understand bits and pieces of that. I think Green Bay was hyper-focused on stopping the run this year, which is why you saw some of those gaps in the middle of the field and the linebackers maybe not getting to depth quite as much. I think we saw an unbelievable jump from week one in preseason to the end of the year with Edgerrin Cooper, to the point where like he was just, you know, kind of starting to get his feet wet on the field to being one of the best players on the field. And that's a pretty significant jump through the course of the season. And I know like somebody pointed out of like, yeah, but you know, Edgerrin Cooper is, you know, like he was set to be amazing. No, Edgerrin Cooper did have a very, you know, sizable learning curve coming to the NFL from his positioning in college and what he was asked to do in college. I was reading through it again too, because I wanted to say like, maybe I was wrong on it, but no, I read through Dane Brugler's, you know, scouting report, and it basically ended by saying he should be able to come in and be a special teams guy immediately and eventually down the road work himself into a 3-down starter. Well, he got to that 3-down starter, or, you know, 3-down starter by the end of the season. So I thought Campanile did a fantastic job with him. And then I thought Eric Wilson had his best year of his career since early in his days in Minnesota, which was almost not quite a decade ago, but it was a long time ago. Isaiah McDuffie, I thought, had his best season. You know, tough to say on Tyron Hopper. It was basically a redshirt year for him. And then we saw some, I think, improvement from Quay. And really, for the first time, I thought there were signs of him really, truly being unlocked. It wasn't consistent enough still, but at least there were signs of it there. So I thought he did a really nice job this past year. And just having his energy and just another guy on the staff that could theoretically be a defensive coordinator, that's always a nice thing to have as well. He'll be definitely missed, and he'll be a huge addition for Jacksonville as they try to find a way to get that organization and that franchise back on track. Derek, thank you so much for becoming a brand new YouTube member. Appreciate that a ton. And yes, Killer Kenny did see Davante Adams' shoes. I don't know if they were new shoes or old shoes or Packers shoes, but they were definitely green and yellow. And listen, Davante is a unbelievable wide receiver. He might be even better at the game of social media. He is, you know, I don't know if he's one of one, but he is up there when it comes to those little, you know, vague social media posts or just kind of poking the bear a little bit. He knows he's been on with Kay Adams, and she's been poking him about going back to Green Bay, and that there's buzz of could he return. And I'm sure he clearly watched the Pack-A-Day video where we talked about his return to Green Bay. And, you know, he's aware of it. So, you know, he's probably saw those, you know, old green and yellow sneakers in the closet, probably hadn't worn them for a while, threw them on, saw how they fit, you know, hopefully they fit well. And, then probably decided to, hey, maybe this would be a fun little thing to post on Instagram. And of course, it does numbers immediately. So Davante is a very smart promoter, a very smart social media presence. He knew exactly what he was doing. I would not read too much into it, but well done, Davante Adams. We've come a long way from constant internal promotions to find guys that are also desired from all around the league. The Campanile situation is a product of that. Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily a, whether that's good or bad. I mean, obviously in the 90s, you had the Grudens and the Mariucci's and the Andy Reeds and the, so many, great people that came from that Holmgren tree that went on to great things. It didn't really ever manifest itself from a McCarthy standpoint. You had Philbin for a little bit, and then, I'm probably missing some people, but it didn't really sprout too many roots, if I'm remembering correctly. And then, the Matt LaFleur tree, Nathaniel Hackett, the only one that's really, kind of branched off too aggressively, and that didn't go great. But it is still great to see that, some of these coaches are wanted around the league. Ansley got the interview. Steno's getting interviews. There's a lot of talent within that coaching structure in Green Bay. And it's a bummer to lose Campanile, but it just kind of goes to show you the talent that Green Bay does have in the coaching ranks within their organization. And Green Bay's ready for that. They knew some of these things were going to happen. They've got coaches waiting in the wings to step up into those positions, and that's a good thing. And they'll kind of rebuild some of that depth within the organization as needed. John, thank you so much for that. I am having a great day. Hopefully it's an even better day in a little bit here as we kind of wrap up our Friday responsibilities. Still have a podcast to record for tomorrow. And yes, I think tomorrow's finally going to be the T. Higgins episode. I've said it for like 4 days now, but I think that's going to be tomorrow. And then I think DJ Reed will be on Sunday. So couple fun episodes coming up for you guys this weekend. Yep, talked about Davante's shoes. Is the Duggan promotion to linebacker coach official? None of it's official. So the new defensive line coach, the linebacker coach, Mannion, none of that's official. The only thing that's official is that Campanile's gone. He's officially with Jacksonville, but Green Bay usually does one official statement at the end when all of their staff is finalized, rather than doing it one by one. Once they have their staff ready to go for 2025, they usually just do one press release of here's who's here and here's any moves that they've made in the coaching positions. So yeah, that'll happen eventually, but there were multiple reports that Duggan is going to be or likely to become the linebacker coach in Green Bay. And it's sort of the expectation at this point. On his show, Neg said signing Mac would hurt LVN's growth, but would that really be true? Preston is out. Mac is older. You can rotate them more to keep legs fresh. Want LVN to benefit from watching Khalil Mack. Yeah, I love Aaron, obviously. This is probably one I don't fully agree with. I understand his thought process. Sometimes in the, kind of in the deadline spur action, sometimes in the, situation where you don't have a Khalil Mack and you need to figure out a way to get pressure, then there's more pressure on the defensive line coach and the defensive coordinator to find ways to get everything they can out of LVN and to really push that envelope and to make it so that he's in the best position possible to succeed. Whereas if you go get a Khalil Mack and you've got a Rashawn Gary, all right, now you got Mack and Gary, and now LVN can kind of continue at his own pace, and maybe he's not pushed quite as hard, or maybe there's not quite the focus or the intensity on it. And maybe that can cause a little bit of delay or things like that. But to me, I still see, I mean, what did let's see here, premium Van Ness this past year played 458 snaps after 444 a season ago. I mean, let's just add this up here for a second. Preston Smith, he played 308 snaps in Green Bay, so 308 in Green Bay. What did Enigbare play? Enigbare played 538. Like, I would like that closer to like 300-ish snaps. So now if we take Preston Smith's 308, let's just take 250 away from Enigbare. That's 500, let's just say 550 snaps right there. Mosby doesn't really need any snaps, if I'm being honest. That's another 150. There's about 700 snaps for Khalil Mack right there without even touching LVN snap count. So take Preston Smith's, take a couple hundred away from Enigbare, take 150 from Aaron Mosby, and you've got your 700 snaps that you need for Khalil Mack right there. And you haven't even touched anything with Rashawn Gary or LVN in their snaps that they, want to play those two. To me, it evens out pretty well. You have Mack and Gary as kind of your starters, or Gary and a premium edge rusher, whoever they might go get as your top starters. LVN is the next guy up and still going to play probably 400 or 500 snaps on the season. So there's plenty of time to develop and grow. And then Enagbari kind of falls into 200 snaps per season, 250 snaps, 300 at most. And I think that sort of evens itself out. And then you, of course, still have Brenton Cox that can rotate in also. So I think that kind of solidifies the position. And I don't really see it as a situation where you're going to lose too much with LVN or, and here's the thing, right? Like if you find ways where LVN is all of a sudden breaking out and Mac is great and Gary's great, like you're going to find ways to get all three of those guys on the field at the same time if you want to. So I think there's still plenty of pressure to make LVN the player that he can become. I think learning from Khalil Mack is a great way to go about doing so. So I actually see it as more of a benefit than as anything that would be a detriment to LVN. Why do you think the mindset is different for drafting receivers? They seem to draft proven high-producing college receivers, but when it comes to defensive end, they seem to take the ball of Clay projection player. It's a great question. I think more often than not, when you look at edge players, we talked about the other day when it came to draft philosophy that the more often, you're going to hit is with the premium athletes and things like that. That even bears fruit more when it comes to edge rushers and pass rushers. That is a freak amongst freak positions. If you want to be an elite pass rusher, far more often than not, you have to be a alien, as Ross Uglum likes to say. And that's why they're usually looking for those at those specific positions. I think Enagbari, if memory serves, at a pretty impressive, productive college career, he's not an alien. And he's a solid player, good rotational player, but he's just lacking in that freak athleticism that you really need to win at a high level at that position. And it just kind of goes to show you too, like even guys like Gary and Van Ness, who are freak athletes, it's still difficult to win at that position. So you need to have productivity, production. You have to have all of the freak attributes. You have to continue to get better technically at the position. It is a very hard position to play and win at with any level of consistency. And look at like the greatest, season of all time. What was Michael Strahan's? Was 22 and a half sacks. I mean, he probably had like 600 pass rush snaps of the year, 500 pass rush snaps. So, 22, let's just say he had 500. He got a sack on 0.045% of his snaps, right? 4.5% of his snap, or not even, 0.045. So like, that's a very small win rate in the NFL. And that's the greatest season of all time as a pass rusher. And obviously there's pressures that go into that as well. But sacks are beautiful, and that's what everyone loves. And 22 and a half is an all-time record. It is very, very difficult to get those in the NFL, even when you're at the best of the best of the best. So it's one of those positions that more often than not, you need the freaky dudes. And if you can't get them, it's going to be really difficult to get to the quarterback with any level of consistency. So I think that's probably why there is a little bit of a difference there at that position. No comp picks for Campanile. I think first of all, it has to be a coach that goes into a head coaching position, and it needs to be somebody that's been on your staff for at least 2 years. I think there's a couple other things that go into it as well, but no comp pick for Campanile. So I should have mentioned this up front. I haven't been keeping super track of it, if I'm being honest, for the Senior Bowl this week. I've been, seeing some clips that have been posted online, and it's been fun to kind of keep an eye on those. But as I say every time this sort of year, or this time of year, right now, really kind of focused in on, we just finished sort of recapping the season right now, focusing in on free agency, since that comes first. That's a month away before free agency kicks off. And then in, probably a couple weeks here, probably early mid-February, I'll dive headfirst into the draft. And I've told this story a million times, but I can't half-ass it. I can't just like turn on a prospect and like watch like 10 snaps and just read up a bio of them and be like, okay, I feel like I'm comfortable knowing what I'm talking about now. Like I have to go all in. And because when I cover the Packers, right, I'm watching every single player on every single play. And I can speak about it because I've put all the time, effort, and energy into it. And now when I want to be able to talk free agency, I can't just look at like PFF's top 100 free agent list and be like, okay, yep, know what I'm talking about. Like I need to go and watch Khalil Mack. I need to go and watch, Drew Dahlman. I need to go watch DJ Reed. I need to go watch some of these guys so I can speak on it so that it's not just like, yep, Davante Adams sounds great. I was all in on Davante Adams. I went and watched the tape. I'm still in on Davante Adams, but I'm not quite as much as I was prior to watching the tape. Khalil Mack, I thought would be a cool idea, but I didn't really love the idea of a 34-year-old pass rusher. I go through on the tape and I'm completely all in. And it's just, we have these preconceived notions of what we like as a player, what the common, group think is on everything. But until, I really go in and dig into it, I don't feel like I can just speak on it for funsies. And I'm never going to be the guy that just half-asses it and says like, yep, I love this draft prospect. Good height, weight, speed. He seems to have good hands. Like, if I can't go all in on it, I don't want to talk about it. Is kind of my philosophy. So right now, free agency is my focus, and there's a lot of other great draft content. And then that's a huge reason, by the way, that I have Ross Uglum on, right? And he can kind of cover the draft in a huge way, and you get the daily draft episodes every single day. He absolutely crushes it. He kind of covers that niche up until, I can get a little bit more caught up on it. And then, of course, you have me and Ross breaking it down. And then it's going to be really, really fun as well. But if you want draft stuff right now, Ross is the guy. And he's going to have you covered every single day. The Kenneth Grant primer is coming out in 45 minutes. For those of you who are members, it's already out there. And then he'll have another one tomorrow. And then we'll go basically Monday through Friday from here on out with Ross. But that's where you're going to get your draft content right now. Give me 2 to 3 weeks and I'll start being in it a whole heck of a lot more. I promise you guys. Happy hour, will fishing with a beer, does it get better? Yeah. Happy hour, well, fishing on a boat in some tropical 85-degree paradise is how it would get better for me, at least for right now. But that's a close second, Derek. And I'm so happy that you're listening, and I hope you catch something great. But we all know that it doesn't really matter because it's the beer and it's the camaraderie. And of course it's the Pack-A-Day happy hour that really makes that stuff go. But hopefully you get some bonus fish along the way as well. By the way, for my awful takes on how to fish yesterday and what you're fishing for and things like that, I have been fishing on numerous occasions. I'm not a avid fisherman by any stretch of the imagination. Most of my experience was done as a kid. I did catch like a second place prize winning bluegill at one point, and I've caught many bass in my life, many perch in my life. My dad always says that I was the best fisherman ever because I had a tendency to catch a lot of fish and I never ate any of them. So everyone else got all the spoils, and I never liked seafood at all. Still hate seafood to this day. So my dad always said best fisherman because I would catch the fish and never eat them. So I do have experience with it. It's just been a hot second. Now I go with my dad and my boys, usually once a summer. We usually catch a handful of fish and that's about it. And my son Xavier loves, cooking up the fish that he caught. So that's a cool experience, but don't get out to do it too much, as you could probably tell from my fishing analogies yesterday. Thoughts on Van Ness? This is a big third season coming up, and I feel like we need to see him take the next step in development. I got nothing to add to that, Andreas. You are 100% spot on. This is a big season for him. Edge rushers are interesting animals. They can break out of nowhere sometimes. And with Van Ness, we know height, weight, speed, athleticism, talent, check. We know effort, check. And this is just a pure, do you have the instincts and the football acumen and the technical skills to exceed at the position? And right now, the answer is no. I do think he took a step as a run defender this past year, which is important. I do think that, again, he has all of those traits that are still out there, and he's going to effort his way into probably 3 to 5 sacks every single year. But now can he take that step and really take the technical prowess up a whole nother notch and really be he's not going to be elite, probably, right? But like a really good pass rusher, like somebody that could get you 8 to 10 sacks per season. That would be a huge win for Green Bay if that step can be taken. DeMarcus Covington is going to have a huge job on his hands to take that group of Rashawn Gary, LVN, Devontae Wyatt, and Kenny Clark and get the most out of them as possible, because you've put a ton of resources into that position, and it's time to start getting the return on that. And now it's up to DeMarcus Covington to make sure that that group is playing to the best of their expectations. Do contract incentives make players play less than 100%? Master Bojangles, I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. Do contract incentives make players play less than 100%? If you have incentives in your contract, I would think that you are more likely to play up to 100% because you do have incentives in your contract. A lack of incentives could theoretically make you maybe play a little bit less. However, you're in an incentive in most situations. You're in an incentive situation every single year, because if you don't play well, teams are going to discard you and get rid of you and cut you, and you may not get that next big contract. And if you continue to play well, you're more likely to see that contract through, get every ounce out of it, and get extensions and or future contracts as well. So it's going to always be a performance-based league, whether you're in an incentive-based contract or not. If you have an incentive-based contract to get certain sacks or, certain metrics through the course of the season, it probably, for some, it's a little bit of an extra motivator. It's like anything else, right? Like at your job or at multiple people's jobs, sometimes your employer will do certain incentives that if you hit so many sales or so many whatever, you get a extra PTO day or you get a bonus or whatever. And some people are like, oh, yeah. Give me that. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to run through a wall to meet those. And other people are like, man, I'm working hard enough already. I'm not doing anything. I don't need an extra PTO day. I don't need an extra bonus. I just want to get through my Friday, right? So with NFL players, I'm sure it's the same thing, where some people are motivated by that carrot in front of them, and others are like, man, I just want to get through this season and get, play as well as I can. And I've got enough on my hands already. I'm going to focus on just being the best player that I can be, So I'm sure it's different for every player, but I think in general, probably incentives are more motivating than not motivating. Good afternoon, Andy in chat. I hope this hasn't been asked, but who are the internal candidates for linebackers coach? Yeah, so it is the internal candidate that is expected to get that position, and that internal candidate is Sean Dugan. He is the Packers defensive assistant. He's got experience as a linebackers coach from Boston College, UMass, Hawaii, and was a Boston College co-defensive coordinator in 2023. The expectation is that he will get the linebackers coaching job and take over. He's been with Hafley since Ohio State in 2019, and it seems like a logical progression for him to take that role. So not completely official yet, but multiple reports that he is going to be the name that does take that job in Green Bay. When can we anticipate a Jaire decision this offseason? Somewhere between the day after the Super Bowl and day after the Super Bowl and probably middle of March. So I think we're probably within a 45-day window would be my guess here coming up. As soon as the Super Bowl is over, you will see teams start to kind of release players, and you'll see teams that have agreed to trades. Remember, they can't trade until the start of the new league year, but agreed to trades. And you can also see, again, players start to get released. And then it could just be that. It could be like they know already and they're just kind of waiting for that moment. And then as soon as it's done, they're going to trade or release him or agree to trade him. It could be that we see a restructure of a contract, which would lead you immediately to believe he's obviously going to play next year. If you see any sort of restructure, that's going to be the sign that he plays. You could end up in a situation where it's very similar to Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs last year, that they're going to hold on to Jaire Alexander until they see what they can do in free agency. And then once free agency comes along, if they're able to get the guy that they want, if they get a DJ Reed, if they get whomever it might be, enter certain name here, Byron Murphy, whoever, if they get that guy, they're going to sign that guy and then release or trade Jaire Alexander. It could also be that this lingers a little bit longer, even into the draft, where maybe they didn't get a guy in free agency and they're still kind of holding on to Jaire. And then around draft time, you could end up in a situation where they put him on the block during the draft and they try to get any sort of pick during the draft. And if they can't trade him during the draft, then they would release him after. There's no real contract incentive. So I guess I would say anywhere between the day after the Super Bowl and probably like the week after the draft. So there's a little bit of a time frame. I think the most likely is going to be something in February or March if I were betting, but it could, I think, linger till about right after the draft. I think that's about as long as it would linger that we wouldn't know anything. But more likely going to be in the next month and a half. Do you think we take an interior defensive tackle early? I think that's definitely going to be something that's on the wish list, Andreas. I think, corner, pass rusher, whether that's on the interior or the outside. I do think, defensive tackle in general. Kenny Clark's probably playing his last year in Green Bay, or at least there's a decent chance of that. And then Wyatt, we don't know what the fifth-year option is going to be yet. So you have potential holes at that position in the long term. And then, of course, offensive line, wide receiver, some of the other ones as well. But I would assume defensive tackle is pretty high on their list. And it just is going to be if the right player is available when they're actually on the clock in the first 3 to 4 rounds. Let's get to some super chats really quick. Izzy, thank you for being a member for 3 months. Appreciate you a ton. Senior Bowl, seen any that could suit us again? We'll talk about that at some point. But again, I haven't paid super close attention to it yet. Sorry about that, Izzy. With Goody's drafts under a microscope lately, which teams can we say with confidence draft better than the Packers since he became GM in 2018? Man, you just wait. I do not want to punt on a super chat question here, but that's one of those questions that not only can I not answer educatedly, but I would have to go through with kind of a fine-tooth comb with everyone's draft classes since 2018 to say, yep, this one was better. This one was worse. This one was worse. This one was worse. This one was better. And even then you end up with a very nuanced answer to that because every team has different draft capital during that time. So, I mean, you could put like a formula together and say, draft capital divided by, snaps times RAS score or something like that, where it would get you this percentage and you could do it for each team since 2018. But yeah, that's a really, really tough question to answer, especially since 2018. But I'd have to, again, with confidence, yeah, I don't even know where I'd begin. I don't even know off the top of my head like that I could name like a player from everyone's draft class since 2018, right? So that would definitely be one that I'd have to do more of a deep dive in. My gut feel, you just wait, is that he's probably above league average for his overall drafts and what he's been able to do. But I think we can also agree that the first round, especially as of late, has been a problem. And he needs to get more impactful players than Eric Stokes, LVN, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, and what those sort of players, I mean, Jordan Morgan, it's still super early, but what those players have provided so far has not been what you would ideally like from the, what you should get out of value in those rounds, in the first round specifically. So I think it hasn't been good enough, but that would be something I'd have to go through and take a lot of time to kind of go through. Sorry about that. You just wait, but maybe someday I'll have a better answer to that. But unfortunately that day is not today. Let's see. Yeah, no, I know 4.5%. I messed it up after, but thank you. All right, Jason, congrats, Andy. You are a new GM of the Packers. You're welcome. If you were to trade Willis, what would your price have to be to move him? Yeah, talked about this a little bit the other day. It was probably the members Q&A chat. Thank you for making me GM. Sorry to all of you for that. You're going to have to put up with me as GM. But here's how I would look at it and kind of how I answered this question the other day. The first thing that I would do the first thing I would do would be to basically pull the league and see if anyone's willing to trade something significant. If I can get any sort of top 100 pick in return, I probably have to make that trade. And the reason that I feel that way is I have 1 year of Malik Willis, who in an ideal world is never going to see the field anyway. He's a really good backup if in case things happen. He's a perfect backup in Green Bay, but you got to think that he's probably going to want to go to a team where he has the opportunity to compete in 2026. So my odds of keeping him more than 1 year are slim, excuse me. And if I have the ability to get a top 100 pick right now, for a player that's only going to be here for 1 year and a player that I'm praying doesn't even play anyway, I think I have to take that top 100 pick. My next thing is if I canvass the league and there's not a top 100 pick available, first of all, I'm not going to trade him. I'll just keep him on the 1 year deal at that point. I'm happy to keep him as a backup. He's a great backup. He fits perfect for Green Bay. There's no reason to be motivated to trade him. And I'm probably going to get some sort of comp pick for him down the road anyway. So I'm at that point, it's just worth it for me to keep him. If I can't get a top 100 pick, especially anything in like the, middle third or above, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to his agent and I'm going to say, hey, you're set to make like 1.4 million this year. What about this? I know you want to become a free agent and hit the market. You're 26 years old right now. What I would like to offer you is to scrap this contract that you're in right now. And I want you to sign a 2-year, $10 million deal, which is basically akin to me giving you a 1 year, $8.6 million deal next year, because you're only set to make 1.4 million this year. But we're going to do a 5 million this year. We're going to do 5 million next year. You're going to be our backup quarterback here in Green Bay behind Jordan Love for the next 2 seasons. That's the going rate for a good backup quarterback. Is the top backup quarterback this last year was 6 million. All right. I'm going to give you 5 million this year, 5 million next year. You get an extra 8.6 million, and I'm going to guarantee the vast majority of it over these next 2 seasons. And I'm willing to bet you that you're not going to get $8.6 million from a team next year, but you get this some guarantees, some money next year, basically an 8.6 million additional by staying with Green Bay another year, a backup quarterback opportunity in Green Bay in a system that fits you really well. And we get what we think is maybe the best backup quarterback in football that fits our system perfectly, that we know how to win with for the next 2 years. That's probably how I would look at it. And here's the thing. Even if you get to the situation where Malik Willis has a huge opportunity this year and he goes out and he balls out, well, you can still trade him next year then, right? And you can still get something even more valuable in return. And that's why I'm willing to take the gamble a little bit and guarantee a little bit next year. At worst, I'm getting a really good backup for 2 years. At best, I might be able to parlay him into something more significant next year if the right situation hits. And for Malik Willis, you get more guaranteed money right now. You get it basically 8.6 million extra, which you're probably not going to see in free agency next year. And even if that, you have 2 good years as a backup the next, year and a half or the next 2 years, you still hit free agency in your prime at age 28. So I think it actually makes sense for Green Bay. I think it actually makes sense for Malik Willis. And that's kind of the direction I would like to see them go in. But if I could get a top 100 pick, I would definitely take that at the moment. All right. Let's see. Jonathan, thanks for being here. Given what Pratt and Clifford gave us early in camp, don't trade Willis. Yeah, I think there's obviously truth in that. Green Bay doesn't make the playoffs this past year, I don't think, without Malik Willis. And certainly not, if that was Michael Pratt or Sean Clifford, you're not making the playoffs last year, right? Like you're going to lose those 2 games early. You probably lose the Jacksonville game. So you might have 3 additional losses on your resume, and that makes it really tough. But if I can get a top 100 pick and go sign someone like a Tyrod Taylor or something like that, like I feel totally fine with that. And the top 100 pick is probably worth it for me. And again, it's a player that I'm praying doesn't even play anyway, and that I only have for 1 year. So that's why, to me, the top 100 pick makes sense. But here's the thing. I don't think anyone's going to offer a top 100 pick. And my assumption is just that Malik Willis will be back next year. So it's probably much ado about nothing anyway. All right. Let's see. Antonio Pierce. No, again, it's by all accounts going to be Sean Dugan is going to be the guy. Sure. I mean, call him if you want, but it's going to be Sean Dugan by all reports so far. All right. Offensive line depth was so bad in playoff game. Don't be surprised. Oh no. Well, I would be willing to bet you they're going to take 3 offensive linemen this year, at least 2, if not 3, and probably one of them in the top 100. Dream off season. There will be an episode on that coming soon, Sam. I promise you that. There will be a, not necessarily dream off season per se, but like a shopping list and what I would like to see Green Bay do. We will definitely put that together ahead of free agency of how I would like to see Green Bay attack their own free agents, free agency, trades, the draft, all of it in one fell swoop. And we'll kind of go through an ideal offseason that way. So we'll get to that episode eventually. What happened with Karl Brooks last season? Smart football people I follow, like Nate Tice, thought he was a potential defensive superstar of his rookie year, but he seems middle AWOL last season. Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, what's been the case is a lot of these first-year rookies who have had success in Green Bay have hit second-year sophomore slumps. And we have not seen the classic prototypical second-year jump. And instead, we've seen the classic prototypical second-year slump or the sophomore slump, whatever you want to call it. That's what I think happened with Karl Brooks a little bit. I think it happened with Dontavian Wicks. I think it happened with a variety of their second-year players. Not with Kraft. Somewhat with Reed at moments. I thought the beginning to middle of the season, he was great. Then hit a little bit of that sophomore slump. But we've seen that far more often than not, where you get this really high thought of a rookie. You're so excited for year 2, and then bang, just hits a wall. I don't know why that is. I can't put my finger on it. They need to have better progression. But yeah, it's a weird phenomenon. I still have a lot of faith in Karl Brooks, but I would put him as the defense's version of Dontavian Wicks, where we saw a lot of really great stuff from Wicks' rookie season. We're all excited and anticipating he was going to have this breakout second season. And instead it was like, that was way worse than the first season. And with Karl Brooks, it was kind of similar. So many big plays his rookie year, super excited about what he could become in year 2, full offseason at his disposal. And then you get through it and you're like, that was worse than year 1. They both need to have big bounce backs in year 3. This is a topic I'm also probably going to be touching on at some point this offseason as well. Just too much regression this past year. Not enough progression, too much regression, and they've got to figure that out They need these guys playing at the peak of their powers. And right now, too many guys this past year did not. There are more than 20 players, I would argue, this past year where we have seen better versions of them in previous seasons than what we saw last year. I mean, off the top of my head, Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton. Let's see. Rasheed Walker was better in 2023, I would argue, at least the end of 2023. Elton Jenkins has had better years than he had this year. Josh Myers did not. This was just Josh Myers' best year. Actually, his rookie year was probably better, but we'll say this was his best year. Sean Ryan was better. Zach Tom, that was probably right around his best season. Karl Brooks, Rashawn Gary. Let's see, linebackers. Actually, Kingsley and Igbare's had better seasons. There's another one I'd put in that group. Preston Smith. Linebackers, I think we're pretty much fine. Corner Jaire Alexander. I think this was actually Keyshawn's best season as a corner. Yeah, that's probably it. Stokes is at his better year in his rookie season. So yeah, probably, somewhere in the 13 players just off the top of my head that have had better, like legitimately better seasons in previous years. I don't know if I said Kenny Clark, that would be another one. So yeah, you're probably talking 14, 15 players who did not show what they were capable of this past year. Like that's too many. And Karl Brooks was unfortunately part of that group as well. Never half-assing anything for funsies ever again, Andy. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate you, my friend. A quick check is who gets second contracts since 2018? What teams have the most second contracts from the draft classes? Then you would need a bigger deep dive into people still on rookie contracts. That'd definitely be one way to do it as well, for sure. Andy, just wondering how teams compete with states that do not have an income tax. Yeah, it's something I'd probably have to also kind of take a look at. From a free agency standpoint, it definitely affects things in the NBA and certainly in the NFL as well. It definitely can kind of add up through the course of time. I don't feel like I've seen a massive trend in that direction where teams are only looking to go to areas where they don't have income tax. But I'm sure this is another one that's kind of on a player by player basis. And some players are probably very motivated by it and others don't care all that much at all. I think the other thing is, I don't know how much the agents care about it, right? The agents are going to stay in their same area no matter what. And you'd be, shocked and surprised at how much influence these agents have on where the players end up. And this is why some players represent themselves. This is why, some players will be more involved in the process. The agent gets the same cut of the money, regardless of what, team that the player signs in. So if, Green Bay's offering $1 million more than what, a state with no income taxes, like I think Florida, right? Then one of the Florida teams, the player is going to be better off going to the Florida team. The agent's going to be better off going to Green Bay because he gets the same, he gets the percentage of the cut no matter what. He's going to get a percentage more of that million. Whereas if he, goes to the Florida team that's offering $1 million less, the player's going to know it. The agent's not. So I don't know how much it ultimately plays a factor, but it could. It probably does it to some extent. And, I think that's also why you have the draft set up the way that it is. You've got the fifth year options. You've got the franchise tags. You've got the transition tags. You can always trade for players. I don't think it plays that much of a factor, but I'm sure for some players it does to some extent. Where was Wooden all year? I actually didn't think that Wooden played like super poorly. He's just the fifth defensive tackle. And everyone was pretty much healthy at defensive tackle for a decent chunk of the season. So, when Brooks and Clark and Wyatt and Slayton are all ahead of you on the depth chart, there's just not that many, snaps left over for the fifth defensive tackle. And he's just kind of a rotational defensive guy where I would argue if your fifth defensive tackle is not noticeable, more often than not, that's a good thing. I mean, how many years did the Tyler Lancasters and the Dean Lowerys and the amongst other players just get thrashed because every time they went in the game, you're like, oh my God, please get that guy out of there. If you didn't notice Colby Wooden as your fifth defensive tackle, I bet he played 200 snaps right around there would be my guess. Wooden. Dun, 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 dun. Any guesses? 260 snaps this past year. If he played 260 snaps and you didn't notice him for a fifth defensive tackle, that's usually a good thing more often than not. Packers front office has a lot of talented scouts that have left to become GMs of other teams over the years. Do you think that naturally affected Green Bay's ability to find superstars? It doesn't help. It doesn't help. Those are, again, you guys are asking some, like, usually I'm going to have things that I can spew off the top of my head on every single one of these. You guys are like really digging in the weeds today, you jerks. This is, again, just one that's really difficult to say because we have no idea who's recommending who in that draft room. If I knew Milt Hendrickson was the one that was all over Edgerrin Cooper, or, John Schneider was all over so-and-so through the day. So he was probably the one that, when he leaves, it's going to be a big loss. My guess is if these guys are leaving and getting promotions, it's probably going to be a loss. They're probably really good at their job. But again, we don't have all 22 of the draft room. We don't have all 22 of what these guys are doing when they're scouting the players. And it's really difficult to say. It could be too that, John Eric Sullivan was all over Edgerrin Cooper, but he was also the one that back in the day said, pick Jason Spriggs. We just don't know. Or, maybe he was the one that was all over Edgerrin Cooper, but a player that was a bust 5 picks ahead of him was the guy he actually wanted, but that guy went. So they took Edgerrin Cooper at that point. These things are so fickle when it comes to it. And it's impossible to say because we don't know who's recommending what players, their exact role within the organization and those sort of things. So more often than not, you lose a scout like that, or you lose somebody in the front office that's really good at what they do. It's going to hurt your organization, but how that affected things in the positive or negative, pretty much impossible to say, unfortunately. Don't the players get hit with income tax for whatever state they play each game in? I think there's something to that, but man, again, you guys are really bringing the heat today. You guys are really bringing the heat on a Friday. I'm going to need to switch this over to whiskey or something. In all my breakdowns that I have done, state income tax breakdowns are not one that I've spent any period of time on whatsoever. So I guess I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have to go back to the tape. I'm going to have to readjust, get my pad level right, start digging into some of these topics that I did not see coming. And I'll have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. I have no idea. Maybe somebody in the chat where you're stressing out Andy can look up state income tax rates and how it works for the NFL. Here's how I always view this thing is that I don't ever care about the cash for the players. Go get as much cash as you possibly can. How that affects your taxes, your bank account, your whatever, I do not care. The only dollars and cents figure that I care about is Packers salary cap related. I never care about the contract the player gets. Get as much money as you can. It just, to me, is how does that affect the Packers salary cap and how much money that they can spend elsewhere. So when they get their checks, how that affects their taxes, that's an H&R Block question, my friend. That's not a Pack a Day happy hour question, but no, I do not know the answer to that. My apologies. I don't think it meets tax criteria. It's literally less than 60 minutes of paperwork. We are really getting into the weeds today. Is there a world where the Packers could acquire a Khalil Mack, a DK Metcalf, and a corner in free agency without draining the bank completely? That's probably a little bit on the over-aggressive. Khalil Mack plus Metcalf plus a 1 year sort of stopgap corner that's on a 1 year, 7-8 million, something like that. They could probably do in that range, something close to it. It's probably a little bit over aggressive, but they could probably come close. I don't think Green Bay will be quite that aggressive. But short-term, small contract-ish corner plus Mack and Metcalf is probably semi-close to doable. Coming from you, I'll take jerk as a compliment. Obviously, I mean it in jest, Matthew, but no, it's very, very good questions. Only sickos in chat at this point of the offseason. That's probably true. All my favorite people. This is what I want, though. I just want these nerdy questions from a free agency standpoint or things like that. But I love it. I love the stuff that you guys are asking. Income tax is based on where the game was played, but still half the games in tax-free state is better for players. There we go. There you go, Kevin. Pinning Kevin for the rest of the chat. He gets a star. He gets everything. I don't know what else I can do here. Kevin, appreciate you, my friend. Alex, I appreciate you as well. Being from Canada, it's so true that the hockey players avoid Canada like crazy, especially because the CRA agency tried to sue a few players over tax money. Interesting. Did not know that. An easy one to take the pressure off is Spotted Cow, the best beer in Wisconsin. No, it's not. It's the best. How do I want to say it? It's the best lager / basic beer in Wisconsin. I'm never going to get if the tab is Miller Lite, Bud Light, Spotted Cow, Coors Light, whatever. I mean, Spotted Cow is just leap years above, right? I can't do with all the options out there now of what beers you can get. I can't ever imagine drinking a Spotted Cow or a Miller Lite, Bud Light, Coors Light, etc. Thankfully, none of these are sponsors at the moment. I can't imagine doing that. Like, I want something that is going to have, like, I'm a big, like, brown ale kind of guy. I love a good Oktoberfest. I love a good wheat beer. There's a variety of I'm not an IPA guy. I'm not a, anything like that. But there's just so many options now that just getting like a plain old basic like lager, like I just can't even bring myself to do it. So it's the best lager / basic beer in Wisconsin. But there are better Wisconsin beers that I enjoy far more than just a basic Spotted Cow. Neg said Cliff Crystal on about the Packers being 2-time 3-peat champions winners. I understand we are in the Super Bowl era. What are your thoughts on the aspect of the current narrative? Yeah, listen, if they want to say this would be the first time to 3-peat a Super Bowl, I'm cool with that. I just wish that there would be a bigger focus on that. Like, yeah, the Packers have actually 3-peated twice already. Like, it's a great opportunity to bring up the history of the game. I'm glad Crystal's doing it. I'm glad Aaron had Cliff on. He's a legend, but just wish the NFL was handling it a little bit different. All right, I got to get out of here. I'm going to go through the super lightning round. You hear a lot about Hafley possibly leaving next year for a head coaching gig if he gets offered. Would Covington be at the top of the list of replacement? Ansley would be on there. Campanile would have been on there. Covington would be on there. And then I'm sure they would open it up external as well to see who would potentially be available. But I would think Ansley and Covington would have a good shot if they had good seasons as assistant coaches this year. Go get Garrett Wilson. That's an interesting name. I don't see that happening, but you never know. Appreciate you, Troy. We should play a game every time you can't answer a question, you have to take a shot. No, because that's going to end up in a lot of crazy questions, but I like where your head's at overall. If I didn't think it would change the dynamic of the questions that were being asked, I would be all in on it. Here's an easier question for you. Eat anything interesting lately? Need some food takes? I don't think so. I'm pretty, speaking of being basic, I've been very basic as of late. A lot of Frosted Flakes for breakfast. A lot of fajitas for dinner lately. And fajitas are very underrated food. We had some really good chili this week. Chili's also great. Noodles and chili. That's my hot take. You got to have noodles and chili. The thin, like spaghetti, very, very thin spaghetti noodles, like the angel hair spaghetti and noodles all the way. How do the Packers resolve cornerback? The free agent class seems mid. I think they probably address it via the draft and probably take a flyer, not a flyer, but I think they probably get like a mid-tier free agent at that position as well. What does non-football Andy do to chill, decompress, watch tape, talk about football? No, it's my son's sports take up a huge chunk of that. So soccer games, football games, basketball games, that is my favorite thing to do. That's the only thing that I enjoy probably more than the Packers. Obviously family time in general, but watching my boys play sports is 1A, to the point where like there'll be an NFL playoff game on and my son's got a soccer game and I've got the playoff game on my phone, but I'm much more enjoying the soccer game for my son. And it's a beautiful thing. So that's the number one thing. I listen, Spotted Cow is good. I love a lot of other more, different types of beers. I'll put it that way. I'm now formally inviting you over to the UK for some real ale. If you like brown, yeah, I'm all in, Izzy. If they go to, I'm pretty set that if they play in Ireland, I'm going to go. I don't quote me on it, but that's my thought process right now. Pogs, appreciate you. The NFL only cares about the here and now. That's true. But I get it. That's kind of how I am as well. So I totally get it. All right, guys, I do have to get out of here. You're the absolute best. I'll talk to you soon. We'll be back for happy hour next week. Great prosper free agent breakdowns this weekend. Look forward to those. Ross Uglum's next draft primer coming up in 12 minutes here. Keep an eye out for that. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.